In the first 7 videos, I've outlined an entirely innovative 4-stage evangelism strategy for evangelical churches that uses the 5 Judeo-Christian principles upon which the Western civilization was built, alongside 12 transformational reforms that would re-establish the 5 principles by toppling the 2 giants, as I call them, those forces at work in the West to destroy it, while simultaneously creating vastly increased opportunities for Christian evangelism. Hello, I'm Michael Saxon, your policy Christian. In fact, the only true policy Christian I'm aware of out in the vlogosphere. If you are not a Christian and you would prefer a non-Christian approach to this, you can go to my Substack, Last Post Bugle. Read my 9 conservative chronicles for a secular version of my vision for a revived Western civilization in which the 5 principles and 12 reforms still feature. I call it, from a Christian perspective, the Next Generation Church Evangelism Strategy, NGCES, or just the NGC as you may hear when you refer it to later in this video. Now, in this my 8th video, I'm going to do a somewhat deeper dive into the whole policy arena by asking a relatively simple question. What would Jesus do in the situation we find ourselves in today? I'm going to quote here to illustrate this from Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. So Jesus is in the governing business. Too many Christians have missed that fact. In his millennial reign, Jesus must surely concern himself with the application of the 5 core principles. Will he not allow, if I go through the principles, will he not allow people to exercise their free will? That's the first principle. Within his just boundaries, of course. We will have the right to choose from the repertoire of rightness. If we do not, we will be subject to another core principle: love God by obeying his commands. We will discover Jesus takes his commands seriously, very seriously, and rules with a rod of iron. You can refer to Revelation 2:26-27 and 12:5. He will expect us to exercise the 3rd principle, individual responsibility. He will have us love our neighbour, the 4th responsibility. And he will see that we have every opportunity to achieve our made in God's image potential, the 5th principle, which, by the way, I normally have as the first principle because it's the most important. Hence, the Next Generation Church model has close ties to God's economy, to the way he does or would do things. Amongst Christians, it is popular to apply the "what would Jesus do" or WWJ test to a course of action, but without giving real thought to the foregoing I've just gone through. We believe Jesus would act in favor of the oppressed, justice and holiness. We would ask ourselves, or we could ask ourselves, what will Jesus do when he is engaged directly with humans, beings, with humanity during his millennial reign? The next table I'll put up comes at it from that angle, using a when-then format to contrast the conditions of injustice and oppression in the West, and that's what I call the problem, with Jesus' likely response should the same conditions evidence themselves during the millennium. To replicate what Jesus will likely do based on the biblical evidence, the NGC would, using the 12 reforms, prophetically promote changes, which is what I refer to as biblical Christian politics in other videos, in communities to revive the 5 core principles. The 12 reforms are intended to reflect what Jesus would be likely to do, and by extension, what he would be likely to expect his church to be doing now, both to love our neighbour and create the conditions for far more effective evangelism. I'm going to put the problem statement that I used in previous videos up now. I'm not going to go through it other than to say that, as you will see, it contains three elements or factors that go into this problem statement, which by the way, was the result of an extensive situation analysis of what's been going on in the West. But the problem and its three facets. The first two facets or challenges are what I refer to as the two giants: fascist liberalism and feudal corporatism. And the third facet, the third challenge, is a weak Western church. The Western church gets itself out of being part of the problem by adopting the next generation church evangelism strategy. So, if we were to then take the concept of the 12 reforms, the 5 principles, and what would Jesus do, and put it together, I would say that we'll end up with something replicated in this table that is going up now. And on this in the left-hand column, I ask when this condition is present. Then in the middle column, what would Jesus' likely response be? What would Jesus do? And then I link it to the 12 reforms. So, when a ruling elite is consistently working against the best interests of the people, by definition, this is not loving our neighbor, then Jesus is likely to make the elite responsible for their actions, ending in any associated sin and injustice and exposing those involved. And reforms 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 12 cover that. Then we have a second situation. A small self-interested elite is using their positions of advantage to accumulate vast wealth at the expense of everyone else, which is what has been happening over the last 40, 50 years. Jesus would likely strip the elite of their wealth and power by ending systems that allow a few to accumulate that power and wealth at the expense of society. And reforms 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 12 cover that. Then a third situation: ordinary people are denied open access to justice. That is certainly the case now. Jesus would ensure justice is free, immediate, local, and transparent. Reforms 1, 2, and 7 would accomplish that. Then we have the issue of usury, which is rampant in the West. That's the interest-bearing debt. It's, as I said, it's endemic, allowing a few institutions to amass personal and financial power over the people who are, by design, mired in that debt. And those few institutions are part of my second giant, feudal corporatism. Jesus would outlaw the practice of usury. He's already done that in the Bible and banking, and initiate a loan-making system that does not link debt with interest payments, assuming, of course, that taking out loans is necessary, or credit is necessary in the millennial reign anyway. And reforms 6, 9, 10, and 12 would accomplish that in our times. The next condition that Jesus would likely address: if ordinary people are treated as serfs, mere workers and consumers, with no effective power as citizens over the most important things in their lives, as we have now, Jesus would enable people to work closely together in their workplaces and communities to create high levels of trust, cooperation, and confidence in each other. They are then free to achieve their made in God's image potential, as the institutions they would create would likely make that possible. And reforms 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 11, and 12 would do that. And the last one we'll look at: what if perverse attitudes to morality and individual human potential are ruining lives and robbing people of their ability to make most of life as created beings made in God's image? That's exactly what is happening right now. Jesus would ensure strong families, moral values, education, and community administration, promote self-reliance, good individual decision-making, and opportunities to make the most of each individual's skill and gifts. And reforms 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7 are designed to make that possible. Now, considerable research has gone into isolating the 12 reforms. The rationale for each of them can be found in my books, Issachar's Call, Against Our Night, and NGC, Next Generation Church. Now, there's free downloads of the original or initial manuscripts of these on www.lastpost.net. Issachar's Call, my largest book, more like a textbook, looks at the West condition from a Christian worldview perspective. It does not specifically isolate the 12 reforms. It culminates in a contemporary Magna Carta, a sort of great charter for public square action by the church and individual Christians in Appendix 3. Applying the separation of church and state convention, the NGC, Next Generation Church, is there to act as society's conscience and guide, using the 12 reforms to get us to back to the 5 core principles. Individual Christians, of course, may choose to engage directly in party politics, but if they do so as partisan political functionaries within the secular parties, they only make themselves fellow travellers with a political class addicted to policies that mandate the things God hates. The first of the 2 giants, Against Our Night, gives Issachar's Call, that's my second book, a sharper focus. It was written to have more appeal to non-Christians by both reducing the number of overt Christian references and the length of the book itself. It introduces the 12 reforms and provides a possible manifesto for their implementation in Appendix 2. My other published book, my third one, my latest one, Next Generation Church, it's entitled actually NGC, Next Generation Church, is essentially a prophetic call for church transformation. Adopting the 12 reforms would give NGCs the right mix of social action, which is dealing with the cause of socio-cultural dysfunction, and social service, which is helping those who have fallen victims to the effect of the problem's 2 giants. All 12 run deliberately, like David, at the 2 Goliaths of liberalism and corporatism, propelling the church out of the wilderness and out of the wilderness it's created for itself over the last 40 years and out of the problem. If they were implemented, both corporatism and liberalism would fall. But the NGC is less concerned about their implementation and far more concerned about their ability to refocus communities on the relevance of the church in their midst, pushing open the door to engagement and evangelism. Now, dismissing the 12 reforms and the NGC model would be a lost opportunity and a serious mistake. Some of the reforms have found favour in other circles. The first has been in operation in Switzerland for at least the last 150 years. That's the reform I call direct democracy. The financial sector reforms would have been called for by many people over the last 100 years, have been called for by many people over the last 100 years, but have been lost, of course, by people who won't hear or won't listen or certainly won't do it for their own self-interest. The first 8 of these reforms would bring down the giant of liberalism to its knees, and the last 4 would lay the federal globalist Goliath flat on its back. The reforms are calling on the Western Church to break back into the cultural space, reasserting the Church's vital role as defender of the faith, truth, justice, and righteousness. So that's a quick introduction to the policy or Christian political landscape we Christians can occupy and use to emulate what Christ would do while rebuilding trust in the church and receptiveness to the gospel. In my next video, I will go to the first policy area covered in this video. That was the first one in that table I showed you, the when-then table, bringing to heel the power of the West's elite using reforms 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 12. So I'm Michael Saxon, your policy Christian, and hopefully you will look for my next video in due course.